On China, it's a little different story. We're resetting the meeting, and it looks like it'll take place in about 5 weeks. We're working with China. They were fine with it. We're going to say I look forward to seeing President Xi. He looks forward to seeing me, I think. But I do look forward to seeing him. We have a good relationship with China. China actually has become economically for us very good, as you know. It's much different than it was in the past. And we have a very good working relationship with China. So we're making it in about 5 or 6 weeks.
That's President Trump pushing his trip to China back by roughly 1 month to focus on the homeland and the conflict in Iran. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer meeting with Chinese officials in Paris over the weekend, hammering out ongoing trade disputes and ensuring communication is maintained between the two sides despite this pushback of the trip. Officials discussed a broad new Board of Trade with China aimed at more closely managing the economic relationship while focusing on tariffs, investments, and the impact of this Iran conflict. Joining me now is the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. And Jamieson, it's great to have you. Welcome back.
It's good to be here. Good to see you, Maria.
Can you tell us a little about your conversations in Paris and this Board of Trade, what you're looking to achieve?
Happy to do that. Our conversation with the Chinese, they were very constructive, very cordial. Clearly, we have a lot of economic challenges with the Chinese. And part of the reason we're having these conversations at the direction of President Trump is to try to find stability and predictability for the relationship. The Board of Trade that you referred to is one potential mechanism of doing that. All of this will be subject, of course, to the leaders approving and moving forward with it, but it would be very helpful if the two sides could simply get together and talk about what are the types of goods we should be trading with each other, preferably non-sensitive goods, and preferably in a balanced way. We're already moving in that direction with the way our trade deficit with China is trending down significantly, and this is an opportunity to further find balance.
Jamieson, let me get your take on where we are on the probes that you have been doing in terms of Section 301 tariff investigations, with 2 Section 301 tariff investigations opened earlier this month. The IEEPA tariff refund situation, people want to know more about. I know that China issued a new warning to the United States with serious concern, they claim, that international trade investigations in manufacturing in foreign countries could, quote, harm the country's economic ties. You recently launched these investigations into the Section 301 of the 1974 Trade Act related to structural excess capacity and production in manufacturing sectors. Give us more of where you are on that, given the statutory expiration of Section 122, that 10% tariff, which will expire in July. What specific countries, trading partners, are you looking at, and where specifically are the probes now?
So right now we have 2 investigations going on that we've initiated, and they're under Section 301, which is a statute that permits my office, the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, to look at these unfair trading practices, make findings, and take action if necessary. One is on structural excess capacity you've talked about, and one is about forced labor, making sure everyone has a law against importing goods made with forced labor. On the forced labor front, this covers 60 countries, 99.5% of our trade. With respect to structural excess capacity, this covers those countries that use a lot of subsidies, produce way more than is required by global demand, and outstrip just what's economically required by the market for goods. And the structural excess capacity really targets East Asia, South Asia, Southeast Asia, even a place like Mexico and the EU, where they have these giant manufacturing surpluses with us, and it's not necessarily for competitive reasons. So we've been talking to these countries already, and we'll get to the bottom of that and hopefully conclude these investigations in the next few months.
And you've got the forced labor 301 public hearing will be April 28th, and the manufacturing 301 on May 5th. Is it fair to expect that this likely could result in tariffs of between 10 and 25%, or is it higher than that?
Well, I can't prejudge the numbers, right? It's an investigation. It's a legal process. It's quite transparent. The way it will work is we'll have these hearings, people will submit public comments, and we'll be able to study the issue. And then at the end, we can take what's called a responsive action. That's a term of art. And the responsive action can be negotiate with the country, impose a tariff on goods, impose a fee on services, sometimes recommendations for other agencies to take action. So I think given how rampant the issue of structural excess capacity policy has been and how long it takes to resolve this issue, you will almost certainly see some responsive actions if the investigations discover what we suspect. But again, we'll go through the process, we'll hear from the public, we'll hear from the countries, and then we'll come out with our findings.
Are you expecting to do bilateral talks with countries such as the EU, in the EU, and Malaysia and India as well?
We are. So those countries are all subject to these investigations. They're very broad. They hit our major trading partners. We're so concerned about the United States being essentially the consumer of last resort, and all the goods end up getting dumped here. You have governments in other countries that provide massive subsidies that depress wages for their own workers, and so they end up having just way too much production than is demanded by the economics of the market. And so you get these huge imbalances that have grown over time. We had a $1.2 trillion trade deficit by the end of the Biden administration. Thankfully, it's trending down now, thanks to President's trade policies, but that's what we're going to be focused on.
Well, you know, it's interesting because in the middle of all of this, as the IEEPA tariff refund saga moves through the courts, you've got a shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security and Customs and Border Protection personnel working without pay. Has that had an impact on any of this, Jamieson?
Well, I think it has an economic fallout, right? You don't always see one major issue, but as time goes on and operations at the border or TSA or travel degrade, that's not good for the economy. So obviously we urge the Democrats to stop doing their shutdown brinksmanship. If you look at our last quarter, our GDP ended up being lower because of the government shutdown. Absent the shutdown, we would have been at over 3%. So any time the Democrats, who profess to love government and think that government's the solution to everything, and then they shut down the government, it makes it incoherent, but it can have economic fallout too.
Well, you also have the Democrat attorneys general and governors from 24 states filing their first legal briefs on March 13th, asking the federal court to strike down the 10% Section 122 tariff. What do you want to say about that?
Well, they want the globalist status quo. They want the status quo ante. It's crazy because I have these situations where I've started these Section 301 investigations on unfair trading practices, and I have the unions like the AFL-CIO and the steelworkers putting out supportive statements. And on the other hand, you have the Democrats saying, no, strike this down and give the money back to all the corporations who are importing foreign goods made by foreign workers in foreign countries. It's totally topsy-turvy. I don't know why they want to give money back to all these companies that preference foreign goods above American goods, but that's what they want to do.
Now, I mean, look, you have other options, right, Jamieson? And I'd like to know if you're thinking about those options. I mean, for example, Section 338 addresses unfair trade practices. It doesn't have an expiration date like the Section 122 does, and it has a 50% ceiling. Is that on the table?
Well, so any tool we have is on the table, and we're looking at discrete circumstances where each tool might be useful. With Section 338, it does require findings of discrimination towards the U.S. versus a third country, so it's not the panacea that some people might say it is, but there are definitely circumstances where it is appropriate because we know there are specific countries that treat the United States differently than they treat other countries.
Yeah, and you know, we talk China all the time. The president, of course, pushing back that trip for about a month. We're in the middle of a war. No surprise that he is delaying that trip. What can you tell us about that? And I want you to know that our viewers have voiced real concern about China and its role in supporting Iran. So I'm questioning why the president is even talking about economic issues with a nation that has been behaving poorly. Here's Gordon Chang with me this week on this program. Watch this. We have been talking about this, and I raised the question in the last 2 weeks, will this Iran war delay the president's trip to Beijing?
The president of the United States should not go to the Chinese capital during a war where China is helping the other side. Matter of fact, China is helping Iran so much that it really is an enemy combatant. For instance, providing military intelligence, weapons, all the rest of it. Everything except for combat troops. So I think that President Trump's message to China is absolutely the right one.
Jamieson, did the fact that China has been supporting Iran, buying 90% of its oil imports, did that come out in your discussions in Paris?
Well, we can't, a little bit, yes. You can't talk to any of our trading partners these days without talking about the war in Iran and all of that. So we certainly talked about that. Iran buys a lot of oil and gas, or China buys a lot of oil and gas from Iran. Iran depends on China as a consumer, so it's of interest to them. China has been actually quite cautious vocally and publicly about Iran. I will say that, behind the scenes there have been, some conversations about, the United States moving forward with Iran and making sure that China, is not a hindrance to that. The president moving his meeting with Xi, it wasn't a negative outcome. It was something that we thought might happen because the president needs to focus as the commander-in-chief on matters here. So we flagged this for the Chinese before it went public. There weren't really any surprises there, and that's why we expect the meeting to go forward. And to the extent there are any discussions between China and the United States with respect to the war itself, I'll leave that to Secretary Hegseth and Secretary Rubio and others who are on that portfolio.
Well, we certainly do not want the commander-in-chief in Beijing while we are in the middle of a war with Iran. But I'm going to take a break and get your take on what you said recently about the money going to companies and individuals. Stay right there, Jamieson. We'll be back with more from U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Stay with us. Welcome back, and I am back with U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer from the White House. And Jamieson, we've been going sort of in the weeds in terms of your policies, the president's trade policy, and I thank you for going in the weeds and talking us about these specifics. Let's go 30,000 feet up right now and talk a little about your goals and what has been achieved so far in terms of the president's trade policy. What do you believe has been the most successful outcome?
I think when we look at the trade policy, what we've done is we have flipped the direction and the trend in the trade deficit. Our trade deficit with China, I mentioned earlier, has gone down by 30% over the past year. And some people will note that Chinese goods can sometimes come in through third countries, and while that's true and we're focused on that issue, our trade deficit with the rest of the world since last April has gone down by 17%. So overall, it's going down. And when that happens, it means that we're making more here. Over the last quarter, we had huge imports of capital goods. So even to the extent we are importing, that profile is changing. It means we're bringing in capital goods, factory equipment, machinery, data center stuff, things that lead to production in the United States. Our manufacturing productivity went up by the most it has in years, and wages for manufacturing workers on the factory floor have gone up by 5% year over year. So all of this shows that the president's trade policy is accomplishing exactly what it wants to do. We're exporting more, we're making more, Americans are producing more things, and they're getting paid more to do it.
And the president has also made this such a priority and has used tariffs as a way to get corporate America to understand these are national security issues. I certainly appreciate what the president has been doing with regard to defense technology. He talked a lot about drones yesterday, and in terms of getting defense contractors to pick up the pace in terms of production here in America. What can you do to actually get that moving even at a higher pace?
Well, we're opening up a pathway for all these companies to make more in America. We're giving them protection in the form of tariffs on their goods. And the president is also making sure that these companies understand that, to the extent government's going to procure goods, we want to buy more, we want to sell more overseas to our allies. So our defense, there's no shortage of customers for our defense industry. As I go around the world and do these negotiations, many of these countries, they want to get the trade deficit down. They say, well, we want to buy helicopters, we want to buy missiles, we want to buy aircraft, we want to buy satellites and all these things. And so we're out there selling for the U.S. We're doing things that will get the defense industrial base a lot of demand so they can scale up, which is really important in a time of pretty fraught geopolitics.
Yes, absolutely. Meanwhile, in terms of the questions around tariff refunds, you've said that the president's tariff refunds should go to the workers of companies requesting them and dole them out as bonuses or raises. The administration released a 4-step plan for companies to file for refunds, which they said will be sent electronically to the designated bank account submitted on the government-run portal. Jamieson, what else can you tell us about those refunds and where you are on that?
Well, what I would say is we're just going to do what the court says. As I mentioned earlier, the Democrat attorneys general, they were really focused on winning this case and getting the money back to all these importers who are bringing in foreign goods made by foreign workers. These are companies, often U.S. subsidiaries of foreign companies, that get this money by law. All the Democrat attorneys general who sued for this, they knew this, they asked for it, and now they're the dog that caught the car because they're getting exactly what they want, is giving money back to multinational corporations, and now you have Democrats saying, well, I know what the law says, but they should somehow go to workers. I mean, listen, this is what they want. It's what they got. Our view is that if you're getting money back, you should be giving this straight to your workers in the form of a bonus or a raise. The tariffs were imposed to help U.S. workers and protect them. You know, you have the Democrat attorneys general who didn't want to protect the workers. They wanted the old status quo. But we believe that companies who are situated to do so should give those refunds, if they get them, to their workers. That's who the money's for.
That's very good. Meanwhile, the IEEPA decision has no impact on Section 232 tariffs, right? That would be 50% steel, copper, 25% auto parts, trucks, 25%, 10% lumber, furniture. What can you tell us about these 6 open investigations with regard to commercial aircraft, jet engines, and drones, wind turbines, and robotics?
Well, the Commerce Department continues to conduct these investigations. Our tariff program is really split into 2. One, we have specific, we had country-specific tariffs to help get the deficit under control and serve as negotiation in some of these deals we've gotten. And then we have the Section 232 investigations, which focus narrowly on the critical supply chains for metals, downstream technology, et cetera. So those are still open. At some point, the Commerce Department will close those, and they'll make recommendations to the president whether there need to be some kind of tariff to protect domestic production or whether something else is appropriate for that. The goal is to get those supply chains back here.
I'll tell you, you are doing such important work on all of this, Jamieson, because I recognize these are all national security issues. You're also beginning reviews of the USMCA agreement this week. When I spoke with you a couple of months ago, you told me that it was likely going to be bilateral deals, U.S.-Mexico and U.S.-Canada. Of course, the president talked about this throughout his second term, but he did these deals in his first term. Discussions surrounding the security of North American supply chains there as well. What can you tell us about those negotiations?
Well, right after this TV spot, Maria, I'm going back to my office and I'm meeting with the Mexican Minister of Economy and his team. This week we are having our first formal negotiations with Mexico on the USMCA, and we are doing it just as the president said. We're having talks separately with Canada, but we've moved along with Mexico. Canada is behind on this. With Mexico, we're already at the stage of some formal talks. We're going to be talking about rules of origin, which is really a term of art that talks about how much content in the goods that are being traded between the United States and Mexico are from the United States and Mexico. We just don't want Mexico to become a hub for goods imported from Vietnam or China or somewhere else. If we're going to have some kind of a deal, it has to be a deal for Mexico and the United States, and the goods should be made up of content from Mexico and the United States.
Now, given the move in oil prices and some commodities like, aluminum or fertilizer, is this weighing into your decision making right now, Jamieson, in terms of where tariff hikes may land?
So less so on the trade front. The reality is the United States, it makes a lot of its own energy, it makes a lot of its own fertilizer, so there's less of a supply issue right now. Obviously, you have things like nitrogen fertilizer, where the price does depend on the feedstocks coming out of the Gulf. So that's something that I know Kevin Hassett and others are quite focused on. There are a variety of tools you can deploy to try to maximize production here and find additional sources and that kind of thing. When it comes to a tariff or trade, you can't necessarily have a tariff modify and have that change the underlying fundamentals of the situation. And frankly, with fertilizers, we don't have and haven't had tariffs on fertilizers for quite a while. But we're watching that very closely as a broader economic team to make sure that the farmers can get what they need in time for their various plantings.
Yeah, I know that Secretary Bessent has tried to increase imports of fertilizer and oil production via Venezuela, which certainly has had an impact. I want to switch gears and ask you your take on where we are with the Federal Reserve. I mean, we've got the Fed's decision, obviously, at 2 p.m. Eastern, and the president has said, look, the Fed should be cutting rates now and not waiting for this meeting. We're expecting the Fed to hold rates steady, with Jay Powell speaking at 2:30 this afternoon. And this is his first speech since the president nominated Kevin Warsh as his successor. Warsh's Fed confirmation hearing, however, appears to be on pause for the moment until this probe into Jay Powell is closed. I spoke with North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer yesterday about it, and here's what he said when I asked the question. Watch. Is Kevin Warsh's confirmation hearing on pause right now until this investigation into Powell goes away?
Unless Tom Tillis has changed his mind or something has happened that would cause that to happen, it is. But unless we can get a Democrat to support, in committee, but I just think as long as we're at a deadlock, Democrats don't have any incentive to help. And I understand that. If I was in their position, I might do the same thing. But we do need Kevin Warsh as Fed chairman soon. So I'm urging Tom Tillis, I'm urging Judge Janine, I'm urging the president, anybody to break the logjam, and let's have this hearing and have a markup and get him on, get him confirmed.
Jamieson, what do you think? When do you think we're going to see a confirmation hearing for Kevin Warsh?
Well, I hope we see it really soon. I mean, this idea that Washington keeps getting in the way of prosperity is incredibly frustrating. This is not what the American people want. We need to have a Fed that's functioning. We need to have a Fed that's responding to actual economic data and developments, not a Fed that has an axe to grind against the president. We're in the middle of huge geoeconomic and geopolitical changes. We're changing the trading system. President Trump is going around cleaning up all these hot spots of conflict. He's clearing out authoritarians who are not acting in the favor of the United States. We're trying to fix all these things, and you have all this, frankly, petty decision-making going on in Washington, and it's not what the people voted for. It's not what the people want, and they need to move it along.
Jamieson, it's great to have you this morning. We so appreciate your leadership. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a good one.
And to you, Jamieson Greer at the White House. We'll be right back.